Good evening, dear listener. Come in, quietly now. Tiptoe past the carved oak desk and into these lamplit aisles. I'm your drowsy librarian, dozing gently beside a tower of well-thumbed ledgers and penny journals. But the crackle of the hearth and the soft rustle of pages have roused a story one, tucked deep in the stacks and edged with soot-gray sorrow. Tonight, while rain taps the stained glass panes and the scent of old leather drifts around us, we'll open a heavy Victorian volume to its darker chapter, the Orphanages of the 19th century. Settle into a velvet chair, feel its cushions sigh, and let the clock's slow tick guide your breathing. We'll move unhurriedly, turning each leaf with care examining strict stone corridors, watered gruel, and the small rebellions that flickered even in the bleakest dormitory. When our tale concludes, I'll close the book with a gentle thud and invite you to wander further through our shelves of calm histories. Fog drapes over a London dawn like frayed muslin, muffling the clip-clop of hansom cabs and the distant clang of ship masts along the Thames. In a narrow alley off Shoreditch High Street, the day begins for little Arthur Barely 7. Hair the color of coal dust, jacket 2 sizes short. His mother coughs behind a lodging-house door, hollow and rasping, while Arthur picks at frost-crusted cobblestones searching for stray cigar ends he can sell for a farthing each. Victorian childhood so often hinged on threads easily severed. A father toppled from scaffolding, a mother wilting in a fever ward, wages halted by an accident at the mill. When that thread snapped, the new poor law of 1,834 offered families 2 bleak branches: parish relief meager outdoor aid soon exhaustador admission to the workhouse. And so Arthur's morning hunt ends at the tall brick facade of St. Luke's Union, where a beetle in brass-buttoned coat ushers mother and child through iron gates that groan like distant thunder. Inside, echoing corridors smell of whitewash and damp wool. First comes the ledger. Names inked in looping copperplate. Ages. Previous address, though Arthur barely recalls street numbers. Then the separation. Boys to one ward, girls and women to another. A matron lifts Arthur's chin, checks for lice, notes the thin scar at his eyebrow as though cataloging a cracked teacup. She swaps his patched jacket for workhouse gray, rough serge that scratches at collar and cuffs. With each garment removed, a sliver of identity folds away like discarded paper. Not every orphan child entered the parish system. Some charities, Dr. Barnardo's Homes, the Foundling Hospital, offered refuge of a different stripe, funded by subscriptions and chapel donations. Yet they, too, maintained rigid regimes. Uniforms starched stiff, timetables ruled to the quarter hour. Whether public or philanthropic, institutions prized order above tenderness. They believed discipline could forge moral adults the empire required. Arthur's dormitory holds 50 narrow iron beds, each with straw palliasse rustling like dry leaves. Gaslight hisses overhead, casting thin shadows on flaking plaster. Around him settle boys of 9, 10, 12. Some whisper hometowns Birmingham. Leads before matrons clap hands for silence. Arthur grips a wooden spoon tucked beneath blanket as talisman against sprawling loneliness. Through cracked skylights he glimpses chimney pots etched black against murky clouds. Somewhere beyond, carts rumble, costermongers cry peelings of wares, and a faint church bell tolls 8, then 9. But within these walls, the night stretches, long measured by coughs, muffled sobs, and the distant clang of workhouse keys turning in a lock. By 1,870 an estimated 0 children slept nightly under England's parish roofs. Thousands more inhabited voluntary orphanages lining industrial cities. Each small body was a cog in a vast social machine supplying apprentices, domestic servants, even colonial emigrants for Canada and Australia. The journey, for most, began just as Arthur's did. Fog, shrouded streets, a gate that shut with decisive finality, and a name entered in iron gall ink. Imagine approaching a building whose brickwork is the color of ash after yesterday's fire. No decorative cornice or ivy softens its four-square bulk. High window set narrow to discourage climbing out glint with cold daylight. In cities like Manchester or Liverpool, these facades rose beside smoky mills, their tall chimneys exhaling soot that drifted down to darken every sill. "There are no toys behind those bricks," murmured factory girls passing on their way to looms. Inside the foyer, bare flagstones echo each footstep. A heavy clock ticks above a varnished desk. Boots must be wiped, caps removed, voices lowered to near whisper. The very air seems to enforce obedience. Arthur, our small newcomer, notices how even grown officials speak in clipped tonessas, though the walls themselves listen. Dormitories stretch the length of the upper floors. Picture 50 narrow bedsteads forged from blackened iron paint chipped, bolts groaning faintly when a child shifts at night. The beds stand so close a caretaker can stride the aisle and lay a hand on any shoulder in arm's reach. At the foot of each mattress sits a wooden locker numbered in chalk. Personal treasures rarely grow beyond a comb, a penny postcard, perhaps a button from home. Sheets are coarse linen, laundered fortnightly in huge copper vats that steam above the yard. Straw mattresses are beaten on Thursday's enact that fills halls with fluttering chaff and sharp admonitions for boys who sneeze without permission. Dormitory casements open only a hand's breadth, allowing stale odors to escape but preventing small bodies from squeezing through. From his pillow, Arthur can glimpse a sliver of night sky. Yet curtains remain forbidden too. Luxurious moonlight often reveals tiny flakes of whitewash drifting from ceiling cracks, like pale moths circling unseen candle flames. During daylight, institutional rhythm replaces childhood chatter. A morning bell can be heard, a brass clangor summoning washline cues. Governor's heels tapping stone as he inspects. Chapel harmonium wheezing hymns whose notes hang in dank corridors. Night rounds marked by the soft jingle of caretaker keys and the creak of wooden sandals. Laughter is not banned, merely scarce arising briefly during corridor chores when someone drops a bucket or muffs a hymn verse. Upon entry, Arthur's surname becomes less relevant than his locker numeral, 47. Matrons' log growth charts and discipline tallies beside that figure. Letters from surviving relatives if Anya read aloud first, then placed in the good conduct box. Misstep, and privileges evaporate. An extra slice of bread, a half hour in the walled garden, even the right to stand near the stove on frostbit mornings. Philanthropic founders defended such austerity with solemn logic. Neat rows and regulated air fostered upright character. High walls shielded innocence from gin shops and gutters. Yet architects also admitted practical fierce escape, contagion, scarcity of staff. Thus bricks grew thicker, doors more reinforced, windows higher protection curving toward quiet imprisonment. As gaslights dim, the matron completes final roll call. She pauses at Arthur's bed, tucks blanket corners, whispers, "Sleep well, lad." That brief gentleness spreads warmth farther than the thin wool. Soon, iron beds resonate with the sighs of 50 children drifting into uneasy dreams, some of chimney sweeps, others of lost lullabies. Long before first light bleeds into dormitory windows, a kitchen maid hefts iron cauldrons onto soot-blackened ranges. She pours in oatmeal ground coarse as sawdust, then ladles water from a stone cistern. No milk, no sugar, only a pinch of salt if supplies allow. Steam rises in slow, sighing columns that bead on ceiling beams before dripping back like cold rain. Arthur and the other boys queue outside the refectory door, each clutching a wooden bowl and spoon issued upon admission personal property, yet identical in form. Bowls show shallow grooves where years of scraping have etched pale crescents into the grain. When the door swings open, children file to benches, arranged in long, unwavering lines. Silence is absolute. A cast-iron sign above the head table reads, "Labor and prayer, not idle chirp." Matrons pace between rows, skirts brushing flagstones in rhythmic swish. If a spoon clatters or a whisper escapes, she taps a desk ruler on see no rebuke needed. The hush resettles like dust. Grace is recited by the governor measured, monotone while steam fogs, window panes, obscuring glimpses of city rooftops just turning pearl gray with dawn. After the final amen, ladles descend, and thin gruel plashes into bowls gray, lumpy, barely warm by the time it reaches the far benches. Arthur dips, spoon, lifts, paste to lips. It tastes of damp oats and faint iron from the cauldron rim. Hunger sharpens palate. Still, each mouthful demands effort. Occasionally, a Weevil Island surfaces, quickly nudged aside, swallowed without comment. For many children, this bowl, accompanied by a heel of stale bread, must fuel 6 hours of chores. Midday fare varies with donations. Surplus turnips from a market stall, bruised apples, sometimes a sliver of boiled beef if a benefactor's table has trimmed fat generously. Portions are weighed by ounces, posted on a chalkboard. The older boys line up at the weighing scales, collecting rations that appear meager yet, on parchment, satisfy institutional guidelines. Evening brings another encounter with gruel, this time barley, or rice followed by one ladle of thin onion broth. Supper is eaten in deeper hush than breakfast. Fatigue settles limbs, and caretakers prefer quiet minds before dormitory ascent. Gaslights dim low to save money. Shadows shroud cheeks as hollow as ladle bowls. For minor in fraction store uniform, late arrival at Chapella child might receive bread and water only. 6 ounces of coarse loaf, pint of cold well water, consumed facing the wall from a solitary stool. The real punishment lies not in the bread's dryness, but in hearing nearby benches clink spoons while one's own bowl remains dry. On Christmas Eve, St. Luke's Union breaks routine. Each child receives a thumb-sized square of currant cake, a teaspoon of treacle, perhaps an orange quarter if donations run high. Taste buds nearly forget sweetness. Such treats bloom like sudden sunlight in a rain-washed yard. Arthur's stores peel in his locker for days, inhaling its fading citrus tang before sleep. Victorian reformers argued scant meals built moral fiber that full bellies bred idleness. Yet inspectors often found wrists thin as icicles, growth charts stunted. Reports filed with poor law boards speak of reasonable sustenance, but letters smuggled by older inmates tell a different tale. Dreams of crusty pies, dripping roast joints, buttered skinesculinary constellations far beyond the iron bars of reality. With bowls stacked, spoons wiped, and benches shuffled silent against walls, children rise. Matrons survey for crumbs none left. Hunger sees to that. As they climb stone staircases, stomachs growl softly between hymn echoes that glide upward from evening chapel. The library's hearth crackles softly while we turn to a harsher leaf of this Victorian chronicling era, convinced that the crooked branch of childhood could be straightened only through firm pruning. Pinned to dormitory doors hangs a slate tablet etched each dawn with the motto, "Spare the rod, spoil the child." Below, columns list offenses and their corresponding chastisement. Talking after lights out, 2 strokes. Blotched copybook, 1 stroke. Pilfered crust of bread, 4 strokes. A system of tokens and black marks predates the cane, yet once marks reach 3, the governor's study awaits. Floorboards gleam with beeswax. A tall case, clock ticks like a metronome for fear. Upon the paneled wall rests the junior Cainthan rattan with oiled sheenan beside it, the heavier senior cane, reserved for older boys. A short leather strap hangs for girls, its edges rounded smooth by use. The governor himself, stiff-collared, speaks little. Ritual supplies gravity enough. Arthur, notebook ink blotted in haste, stands trembling, sleeves rolled, palms placed flat on a scarred oak desk. He braces as Rattan whistles. 2 swift cuts sting across thin serge trousers, smarting into skin. Tears sting eyes, yet training forbids a cry. To weep is to invite an extra stroke. When dismissal comes, the boy murmurs, "Thank you, sir." A phrase learned by rote, symbolic acceptance of correction. Certain punishments unfold before assembled wards. A recalcitrant child may kneel on cold slate, holding a heavy Bible at arm's length while peers recite hymns. The weight drags shoulders, time drags harder. Matrons claim the spectacle educates bystanders as surely as the culprit. Instruments of discipline that were commonly used are the rattan cane, flexible, leaving thin wheels that fade within days. The tawses split leather strap common in Scotland, designed to sting rather than bruise. Finger stocks, small wooden block clamping thumbs for half an hour to cure nail biting or pilfering. And backboard frame which straps a slouching child upright to correct posture, often during dictation lessons. Each tool aims less at pain than at obedience, etched into muscle memory. Reformers argued such strictness forged industrious citizens. Dr. Thomas Arnold of Rugby wrote, "One thorough beating suffices where 100 gentle words fail." Charitable appeals boasted of rescuing urchins from perdition through wholesome discipline. Yet inspectors occasionally recorded overzealous staff. A matron dismissed for striking a feverish girl who fainted. A governor censured when canings left bruises visible after a fortnight. Children learned to tuck slate shards into trousers, spreading cane impactor swap-numbered tokens to confuse the mark ledger. Older boys whispered codes. 3 taps on bedsteads signaled night patrol approaching, sparing whisperers extra strokes. Each tiny defiance reclaimed slivers of agency within iron-lined rules. Not all staff wielded rods eagerly. Sister Abigail, an infirmary nurse, slipped comfrey salve to Arthur after class, dabbing stripes with cotton. "Discipline heals faster when soothed," she murmured, tucking flask back beneath starched apron. Her kindness glowed brighter for its rarity. As curfew bells echo, Arthur lies on straw mattress, stripes prickling beneath thin shirt. Pain mingles with exhaustion until dream edges blur. Yet somewhere within the ache nests determination, an ember that whispers he will write neater lines tomorrow, not for fear of Cain, but to protect the bruised skin he alone must carry. The first gray hint of dawn scarcely touches the cathedral spire when a sharp whistle pierces orphanage halls. Children stir from straw mattresses, still sore beneath surge, and shuffle toward the workroom's vast chambers whose sounds will weave themselves into the fabric of their days. Arthur joins a line of boys, entering a long shed where rows of narrow looms clatter like relentless rain on tin. Oil lamps swing overhead, casting yellow halos upon whirring wooden frames. The air smells of raw cotton and machine grease. Fine lint drifts in sunshafts like tiny ghosts. Each boy stands before a loom, scaled to child height. Their fingers, thin and quick, dart to guide broken warp threads back through eyelets no thicker than a pin. A supervisor paces, tapping a tally board. Every fixed thread earns a chalk mark, Slack throughput earns a scowl. Conversation is forbidden. Only click-clack rhythms and the occasional hiss of shuttle bobbins break the semi-dark. In theory, skilled repair boys may earn halfpenny rewards, exchangeable for writing slates or an extra bread slice, but seldom does the tally surpass deductions for spilled oil or misthreaded yarn. The arithmetic of hope shrinks to near zero. Older lads move to the wood-turning annex, scented with pine shavings that pile knee-deep beside treadle lathes. Foot pedals pump, spinning dowels used for chair spindles sold to local furniture shops. Shavings fly like pale curls, settling into shirt collars and hair. A distracted moment can draw sleeve to blade. Thin scars along wrists tell silent cautionary tales. Not all work happens under orphanage roofs. Some children rise before dawn to march in double file toward nearby factoryous textile mills, matchworks, rope walks contracted through apprenticeship agreements. The orphanage receives a small stipend per head. The factory gains obedient labor, cheaper than adult wages. On farms, cottage homes in Yorkshire or Kent place children in field gangs. Tiny fingers adept at loom, maintenance also suit potato picking and stone removal, crouched for hours beneath unpredictable skies. Exposure to sun, rain, and raw winds reddens cheeks and cracks skin, yet fails to crack the rhythm of quotas. Governors defend the toil as vocational training. Better a skill than a life of pauperism. Annual reports boast of boys apprenticed to tailors, girls to laundry houses, but many placements mirror exploitation more than education. Few apprentices return as master craftsmen. Most funnel into low-wage adult labor. The orphanage merely a prelude. When loom shuttles strike temples or blades nick fingers, children report to Sister Abigail's infirmary. She dabs iodine that stings like nettle, then bandages with muslin strips. Serious harm, broken limbs, scald burnsis recorded in the incident ledger, later sanitized in board reports. Still, within the infirmary's hush, Abigail sometimes reads a psalm, offering comfort beyond compresses and tinctures. Yet even amid drudgery, sparks of pride flare. Arthur glances at a length of pristine cloth woven without a single skipped thread. His chest lifts subtly. A supervisor nods once approval fleeting but treasured. Another boy smooths a perfectly carved spindle, smiling faintly before tossing it onto the finished pile. Skill, however coerced, plants seeds of competence that may blossom later beyond orphanage walls. As lamplight dims, bells signal cleanup. Children sweep lint and shavings into barrows, scrub oil spots from stone floors, hang tools upon pegs. Shoulders sag, yet a flicker of relief glows. Workday conquered. Outside, the sky blushes rose over factory chimneys. Tired feet shuffle towards supper's thin broth, but footsteps carry a rhythm steady as loom clacks evidence of endurance. Along a quieter corridor, far from loom clatter and lesson recitations, a heavy oak door stands partially ajar. A yellow placard nailed to its panels reads Fever in bold, hurried lettering. Soft lamplight seeps out around the frame, carrying with it the sharp tang of coal tar disinfectant and the faint herbal sweetness of camphor. Within lies the orphanage infirmaria, place of night-long coughs, whispered prayers, and the thin line where frail bodies wrestle unseen foes. Step inside. Curtains of coarse linen divide narrow iron cots, though privacy is more suggestion than fact. Sister Abigail moves between beds, skirts rustling, kerosene lantern balanced in practiced grip. Along one wall, a tin stove clicks as it settles, breathing just enough warmth to temper damp winter chill. On bedside tables stand blue glass bottles of castor oil, willow bark tincture, and Godfrey's cordial, its opium undertone hovering beneath peppermint scent. Arthur lies beneath the worn gray blanket, sweat beading on his brow. A week of midnight loom duty weakened him. Now, scarlet spots bloom across his chest measles. The cough of the boy, 2 beds over, carries deeper menace, consumption's hollow rattle that seems to drain the very air of hope. Victorian medicine understands germs only dimly. Nonetheless, matrons enforce strict routines. Clothing boiled in lye, straw mattresses burned after cholera outbreaks, walls white, washed with lime between epidemics. Twice a week, the steward wheels in a brazier of burning sulfur. Pale smoke curls into rafters, eyes sting, throats roughen. They call it fumigation purifying air by fire's invisible hand. Fresh air, believed curative, prompts wide windows even on frost-rimmed mornings. Children shiver beneath blankets while cold drafts mingle with sickbed breaths. Drafts may chill, but stale air very one, insist skills. Dr. Ellison arrives each afternoon, greatcoat smelling of horsehair and winter rain. He taps chests with silver stethoscope, checks pulse with cool fingertips, prescribes poultices of mustard seed for pneumonic lungs or doses of quinine for malarial fevers carried by river fog. His ledger notes facts. Boy, 47, measles day 4, mild. Girl, 62, typhoid suspected, isolation recommended. The doctor's visits are swift. 20 patients await at the workhouse infirmary across town. Records show mortality in some London orphanages reaching 10% during bad measles years. Smallpox can steal entire dormitories, yet numbers only hint at grief. Matrons stitch burial shrouds by dim candle, folding hands that once mended loom threads or sorted wooden spools. When a child dies, a bell tolls once at dawn. Companions gather near the coffin pine boards quickly nailed, bouquet of hedge violets laid upon the lid. Then life marches on. Looms resume. Copybooks reopen. Bowls queue for gruel. Still, kindness survives. Sister Abigail brushes damp curls from feverish foreheads, whispers lullabies learned from Irish childhood. Older girls fold paper boats, floating them in wash basins to distract measles' itchy fingers. On rare sunny afternoons, convalescents shuffle to a small courtyard where warm bricks leach comfort into chilled bones. Arthur feels a cool cloth upon his cheeks. Abigail hums, "Abide with me." Through half-closed lids he glimpses autumn sky, pale but kind. Days pass. Spots darken, then fade. Cough loosens. Appetite returns. One dawn he swings legs over bed edge and walks unsteady but upright toward the recovering ward. Beds vacated by the healed fill quickly. Waves of illness respect no timetables. Yet each recovery sparks quiet celebration. An extra spoon of barley broth, a smuggled apple slice, a fleeting smile from the stern matron who usually counts spoonful errors. The lamps in our quiet library gutter once, then steady. Somewhere beyond the shelves, a breeze rattles a pane, as though the outside world insists upon interrupting our calm with its louder murmurs. And so it was in Victorian Britain. While orphanage corridors tried to mute children's cries behind high walls, the penny press sharpened its quills and slipped their stories into every breakfast parlor. By the 1860s, cheap wood pulp newsprint and steam presses churned out thousands of broadsheets each dawn. Murder, baby farming, and starving children blared headlines in thick Gothic type. Vendors hawked them at railway stations, crying news that both titillated and troubled commuters wrapped in wool greatcoats. Some earnest reformers. Others, chasing circulation, ventured into alleys and workhouse wards, jotting notes by stub candles or recalling scenes from memory when officials barred entry. Sketch artists transformed observations into engraved illustrations. Gaunt infants in stained chemises, dormitory rows beneath cracked plaster, a matron's shadow looming across meal queues. In 1872, the Illustrated Police News exposed St. Jude's Industrial Home in Birmingham after 3 boys absconded and staggered into a city chemist, wrists raw beneath bandages. They spoke of blistering treatment, mustard plasters strapped for hours as punishment for taking extra turnip stew. Within days, a journalist slipped through a tradesman's gate, sketchbook hidden beneath oilcloth. His article described bruised shoulders, thin blankets, and larder locks strong as prison doors. Public reaction was swift. Letters to the editor demanded inquiry. Sermons decried Pharisees cloaked in charity. A Home Office inspector arrived unannounced, his report confirming much of the tale. Trustees replaced the governor, repainted wards, and promised warmer quilts, but the lasting change was harder to quantify. Parents and donors began asking sharper questions, their faith in institutional benevolence shaken. While older orphans endured gruel and cane, infants too young for work were sometimes surrendered to baby farmers. Women paid small sums to foster unwanted children. Most tended little lives with modest care. A few, like Amelia Dyer of Reading, pocketed fees, then starved or suffocated babies, hiding bodies in trunks or river weeds. When police dredged the Thames in 1896 and found parcel after parcel wrapped in white edging tape, the story eclipsed all else. Newspapers printed lithographs of forlorn booties, editorial cartoons of Mother Dyer as a vulture, and long columns debating how poverty, secrecy, and lax oversight bred horror. Parliament tightened adoption law. Charitable homes rushed to advertise their transparency. Yet behind closed dormitory doors, discipline remained stern. The outrage focused not on daily hunger or routine canings, but on the grotesque extremes that made the blood quicken and the purse strings loosen. For some children, press attention meant tangible relief. After the Times ran a series on clerical mismanagement at a Liverpool orphanage, philanthropist Angela Burdett Coates funded hot breakfasts and a larger infirmary. Yet scandals could fade quickly beneath new headlines of Zulu wars or transatlantic feats. Reform lagged. Institutional culture changed only as swiftly as funding, governance, and public memory allowed. Occasionally, older orphans themselves became chroniclers. In 1888, the Labor Tribune printed excerpts from the diary of E.M., age 17, former inmate of a Yorkshire home. Her measured prose detailed dawn scrubbings, bread and dripping suppers, and Saturday night hymn practice where girls whispered dreams of real homes with gardens. The piece ended not in dramatic rescue, but in departure for a laundry apprenticeship proof that even modest testimony could humanize statistics. The storm of scandal subsides, and we return to quieter aisles of our library, those slender margins where warmth crept in despite stone walls and iron beds. Even the sternest Victorian orphanages harbored small mercies, as though human tenderness refused to be barred alongside rowdy whispers after lights out. Each winter evening, when corridor lamps flickered and drafts prowled under doors, Sister Abigail made her final rounds with a squat brass lantern. She lingered at each bed, fingertips grazing foreheads to gauge fever, smoothing blankets with the care of a seamstress pressing new cloth. If she found a cough too ragged, she produced a teaspoon of treacle kept secretly in her apron pocket, strictly off-ration and hushed protests with a wink. For the littlest ones, she recited half-remembered Gaelic lullabies, notes drifting upward to mingle with gaslight hiss. On a snow-bright December morning, a rattling cart arrived from the Ladies' Benevolent Society. Out clambered 3 determined women in velvet capes, cheeks pink with cold and purpose. From wicker hampers, they unpacked oranges burning like miniature suns, tins of condensed milk, and most dazzling two great plum puddings wrapped in muslin. The kitchen maids steamed them all afternoon. Cloves and nutmeg perfuming hallways, usually rank with boiled parsnips. At supper, the governor allowed one generous slice per child. Arthur savored his slowly, raisin by raisin, committing sweetness to memory for future leaner days. Not every staff member wielded cane or ledger with equal vigor. Mr. Everett, the writing master, believed stories strengthened minds more than wrote. Twice a month, he smuggled slim novels beneath his lesson plans, Dickens in one coat pocket, Andersen's fairy tales in the other. During copybook drills, he left a volume atop his desk, spine cracked just enough to tempt daring readers. When matron's footsteps echoed, he cleared throats loudly, giving pupils time to slide tales under blotters. So, beneath rows of impeccable copperplate, imaginary worlds blossomed. Iron bedsteads became pirate decks. Gaslights morphed into moonlit castles. Beyond the laundry yard, a forgotten strip of soil nursed 4 resilient rosebushes. Miss Deering, a junior matron with ink-stained fingers, recruited Arthur and 2 friends to weed the patch every Friday. Kneeling in damp earth, they breathed the scent of loam and unfurling petals of fragrance sweeter than stewed onions. Miss Deering taught them to bud graft, tying slender shoots with horsehair. By midsummer, crimson blooms bowed heavy on thorny canes, and each child was permitted to cut 1 blossom for his bedside jug. For nights thereafter, the dormitory smelled faintly of roses instead of coal dust. Some benefactors preferred pen to pudding. The Reverend Hopley of Durham kept a list of Wednesday children orphans born on that midweek day, a quirk he found poetic. Once a quarter, he sent each Wednesday child a postcard showing cathedrals, steam locomotives, or Lake District valleys. On the back, he copied a Bible verse and a personal line. Arthur, may your pen grow nimble as a skylark's wing. The cards arrived like bottled messages cast upon a harsh sea, proof that someone beyond the orphanage walls knew a boy's name and wished him well. In the fever ward, Sister Abigail stored her stethoscope in a tin whose lid was etched with a single word: resist. She explained to puzzled convalescents that the greatest resistance was gentleness. Where cold rules, we answer with warmth, she said, tucking quilts closer. Her quiet motto spread. Children began swapping morsels rather than hoarding them, helping each other master stitch or sum. Small kindness ignited further kindness, like lanterns passed along a dark hall. Such mercies never rewrote institutional policy, yet they reverberated in unexpected ways. The Ladies' Society, noting children's flushed delight, petitioned for weekly fresh fruit rations. Mr. Everett's clandestine novels spurred 3 boys to attempt their own penny cereal. Arthur's rose knowledge earned him, years later, an apprentice spot at a suburban nurseria path far removed from loom dust. The day's clang of dishes and lesson bells fades, replaced by soft sighs of bedsheets settling. In the dimness, Arthur fingers the smooth edge of Reverend Hopley's latest postcard, tucked inside his pillowcase, rose scent lingering nearby. Outside, snow flurries tap the leaded windows, but inside, a hush of gratitude warms the ward. Somewhere in the stillness between midnight patrols, a floorboard creaks soft, deliberate. Arthur slides from his iron bed, breath held, bare toes searching the cold plank he loosened weeks ago. Tonight, the pull toward freedom outweighs the fear of rods, rations, and stone walls. Many Victorian orphanages sat cheek by jowl with warehouses or terrace roofs. A cracked gutter pipe, a laundry yard shed, or the narrow ledge of a chimney stack could form an improvised ladder to moonlit tiles. Children mapped these routes in whispers, their imaginations charting each loose brick like pirates plotting hidden coves. Arthur wriggles through dormer window gap just wide enough for a boy of 13 and pads along slates slick with frost. Below, gas lamps cast orange puddles on cobbles. Beyond, the river glimmers pewter beneath Kensington Bridge. He breathes air unsieved by lime wash and steam, pockets beating with contraband, half a heel of bread, a stub of candle, Reverend Hopley's encouraging postcard. Runaways often aimed for the rag-and-bone alleys of Whitechapel or the hissing rail yards at Paddington, places where a small frame could vanish into shadows, exchange odd jobs for crusts, and dodge constables who carried broad authority to return absconded pauper children. Some found refuge in docks, hauling tea chests. Others crawled beneath tarpaulin on night trains sliding toward distant counties. Not all escape forges success. London's gin-tainted fog swallows many. Hunger pushes some back to the orphanage gate, where the governor's ledger awaits in cold ink. Yet every attempt chips a corner from institutional certainty, reminding caretakers they guard spirited minds, not blank slates. For children who eluded recapture or who worked by day but roamed free by dusk, the ragged schools offered lantern-lit sanctuaries. These charitable night classes, often set in rented lofts, served bowls of porridge beside primers of ABC. Teachers were volunteers, clergymen, factory clerks, even reformed pickpockets eager to spare others their mistakes. Inside cracked plaster rooms, chalk dust mingled with coal fumes. Children huddled close on benches hewn from tossed shipping crates. Lessons ranged from scripture to simple sums. But the true curriculum was possibility. Knowledge that one might spell a street sign, write a plea to a relative, or tally a day's wages without deception. Arthur reaches such a loft off Drury Lane. A widowed seamstress named Mrs. Llewellyn greets him with chipped mug of milk. By guttering candlelight, she shows him the letter A drawn on slate. His finger traces it cautiously as if the line itself could unlock padlocks back at St. Luke's Union. Back behind orphanage walls, those who stayed found subtler rebellions, secretly sharpening slate pencils to swap notes, humming forbidden street ballads during laundry folding, or staging silent strikes by slowing loom repairs to a crawl. Each act risked canings, yet carved micro-spaces of autonomy. When Arthur's friend Samuel is denied Sunday garden time for misthreading, fellow boys whisper directions for building a paper kite from ledger scraps and broom straw sand airborne rebellion that flutters above the yard until a matron confiscates it with grudging admiration. Escapes and ragged school attendants fed reform debates. Pamphleteers argued that if children fled structured care, perhaps the structure, not the child, was amiss. Parliamentary committees piled testimony. Boys sleeping under arches rather than rigid cots, girls preferring laundries with wages to training homes with none. These narratives pressured officials to soften rules, expand garden time, and accept that learning might bloom better under kindness than coercion. After a fortnight of alley sleeps and ragged school lessons, Arthur feels ribs countable, but eyes brighter. One drizzly dawn he stands before St. Luke's gate. Sister Abigail opens it, surprise melting to relief. The governor scolds, yet reduces Stripe's rumors of press scrutiny make him cautious. Arthur's daring yields unspoken leverage. His chores shift from loom to garden carer, where roses he once nurtured now expand under open sky. In the dormitory, Arthur tucks chalk-etched A-slate fragment beneath straw mattress. Rain taps at skylight panes, echoing his newfound understanding. Walls may loom, rods may sting, but knowledge and courage seep through cracks like moonlight. He closes eyes, dreaming not of rooftops now, but of future pages he might one day inscribe. Dawn edges the coal-smudged skyline with the faintest wash of pearl. Yet change often arrives even more quietly than first light. By the 1870s, inspectors' ledgers bulged with statistics on stunted growth and high mortality. Parliamentary blue books echoed with witness accounts of Rod and Gruel. Gradually, sometimes grudgingly, the vast brick orphanage began to yield to gentler ideas. In 1867, a select committee on poor law schools toured London workhouses, its members shocked by iron bed rows, sour broth, and children's dejected aspect. Their report recommended cottage-home clusters of small houses grouped around gardens, each overseen by a house mother rather than matron and governor. 2 decades later, the 1889 Prevention of Cruelty to Children Act, often called the Children's Charter, granted magistrates power to remove youngsters from brutal institutions into safer care. Hull, Sunderland, and Sheffield led the way, constructing low brick cottages trimmed with climbing roses. 10 or 12 children lived per house, sharing supper at wooden tables, tending vegetable plots, and sleeping under patchwork quilts instead of gray serge blankets. Hard work persisted laundry, field chores, but brutality softened. The house, mother's admonition replaced the governor's cane, and punishment rarely exceeded loss of pudding or weeding an extra row of carrots. Arthur, now 15, is among the first transferred. He steps off a rattling carriage into a lane flanked by hawthorn hedges. The cottage door opens onto warm lamplight, scent of baking bread, and a tabby cat that blinks in gentle surprise at newcomers. His bed stands beneath a small window looking onto cabbages glistening with dew. That night, wind in the thatch sings softer than any hymn echoing through St. Luke's dormitory. Scotland and rural counties favored boarding out. Vetted village families received small stipends to raise orphans as foster children. Inspectors visited quarterly, checking for clean clothes and regular schooling. Results proved mixed. Some foster homes used stipends as added farm labor, yet many children thrived in the rhythm of family hearths. Porridge ladled with affection, lullabies woven from dialect unknown to London wards. Meanwhile, Dr. Thomas Barnardo, moved by East End destitution, opened his first Home for Little Wanderers in 1866. He abolished admission fees and famously declared, "No destitute child ever refused." Critics called him idealistic. Supporters donated by candlelit lectures. Barnardo's later emigration program sent tens of thousands of orphans to Canada and Australia. Accounts vary. Some children found loving farm families, others toiled lonely in northern winters. But the idea of fresh air opportunity captured Victorian imagination. By 1905, parliamentary returns show over half of pauper children in England and Wales placed in cottage homes, foster care, or smaller charitable houses. Large barrack-style orphanages shuttered, repurposed as hospitals or schools. Arthur, who once dodged shawl-covered figures and steam loom supervisors, now prunes rose canes for the cottage-home garden, teaching younger wards how to graft buds just as Miss Deering once showed him. The cycle of knowledge, a tough seed in harsh soil, finally blossoms in warmer beds. Still, bricks remember. Some grim edifices stand yet, museums of social history, where visitors lean close to iron beds and run fingers over cane marks etched into desk lids. Display placards praise reformers and philanthropists, yet the echo of tin spoons scraping thin gruel lingers faintly in vaulted ceilings. It reminds us vigilance must walk beside compassion, lest old shadows resurface in new attire. My dear listener, the lamps in our quiet reading room have guttered low. Ashes settle soft in the grate. We have turned every leaf of this somber volume, followed Arthur from fog-soaked streets through workhouse gates, across fever wards and cottage gardens to the gentler cusp of a new century. If your eyelids grow heavy, let them fall. The story will keep its place between these covers. Before you drift away, remember, our shelves are lined with further tales of Roman revels, Egyptian pharaohs, medieval mischief, and more corners of history whispered in this same unhurried hush. When you wake or should sleep refuse to claim, you simply follow the links at the end of this video to continue wandering our stacks. The Drowsy Librarian is always here, dozing beside another lamplit saga, ready to read just one more chapter whenever you return. Good night, gentle friend. May your dreams be kinder than any workhouse ward, and your rest as deep as a garden bed beneath blooming cottage roses.